Welcome all of you to this class of Basics SQL Server. So before we start, I'll give a quick introduction about myself. I'm Arun Balachandran. I have been working in IT from 2002. My area of work is mainly that of database and also .NET. In database, I have been working with SQL Server Database Engine for OLTP, development of OLTP or Online Transaction Processing System, as well as, hello everyone, we are going to start the session for SQL Server Basic. So my name is Arun Balachandran and I have been in IT industry from 2002. Basically an electronic engineer. In IT, my focus area has been database and database not only for OLTP system or online transaction processing system, also a database system which is focusing on analysis. So that has been my focus. Of course, the entire process from getting the data from the input application, processing the data, which is using an ETL tool, and then getting analysis done by certain services and then getting reporting. So this is my area. And because I have been from Microsoft side, the focus is on using Microsoft technology for the same, getting the data input from the users and making the data ready for analysis and finally report the data. So this has been the area that I have focused on. I have done many trainings on this and also have done consulting on data analysis. So that is my introduction. Now let us go to the introduction of this course. So I am just sharing the Office, the Word document, which contains the information about this coverage. Now this coverage of SQL Server Basic is mainly meant for people who are new to SQL Server, who are freshers, as well as people who have been working but in some other technology. New to SQL Server, has some basic knowledge on tools like Excel, Access, which store data. This is the entry profile that we are looking at. So somebody who already knows SQL Server, we are having the next session we will be looking at, which is called Advanced SQL Server, where we will talk about more advanced concepts. Assumption is that people know basic. In here, assumption is people do not know the basics of SQL Server also. So it is a 30 hours session. So it will roughly take 1.5 months, 5 days a week. And the timing is, of course, something that we can decide upon. So as of now, the suggested timing is 7:30 to 8:30. So today we start. Initially, I'll be talking about introduction to databases, a very quick session on OLAP versus OLTP, ER modeling, table normalization, logical architecture. So this is what we'll be talking about initially. So you should know that how the database system is being used. It is no different from how it was used earlier than now. Only the way it is done is changing, like using cloud, using certain new tools. And of course, it is getting better and better. So the time between data which you get from the user in any business to the analysis that is done by the system to get a data. So the difference, the time difference is reducing and the tools are becoming better. And of course, it is giving more insight into the data. So I need more insight to understand the data. So why databases is important? Learning databases is important because anything that you take now has to deal with data alone. In fact, artificial intelligence also, you require data because unless and until you give data for training, artificial intelligence will not be able to generate new intelligence and help the human being with all the activities that it helps. And similarly, for data analysis also you require artificial intelligence. So both are interconnected. So at least at a basic level, I should understand how applications store data and how they are analyzing. So that is the objective of this course mainly. Now, the initial introduction part we will do, then we will be looking at table design. Table design, when we are talking about, once you have tables created by the process that I'll be showing you in the introduction, we will have to talk about in SQL Server, what are the data types that are available? Then how do we create keys for ensuring entity integrity? The data types ensure data integrity. Then I will have certain business rules, some basic business rules. How am I going to take care of it? That is through check constraints. So we'll be looking at check constraints. So with this, what happens is in the design phase, you would have designed certain tables, and those tables are implemented in SQL Server using the table design. Okay, but before we move to table design, you would have already covered the logical architecture of SQL. So what do I mean by logical architecture of SQL Server? That means how the components of SQL Server, what are the components of SQL Server, how they are accessed, how they are connected to each other. That is what the logical architecture of SQL Server talks in. Once you have completed table design and you have tables in place, and you now have to put some data in. So we are going to talk about T-SQL. T-SQL is a language, and this language is used for the purpose of DML and DDL. There are two options available, so I'll explain both. This language basically comes from ANSI SQL, that is American National Standard Institute. They have prescribed a structured query language. And this T-SQL is the Microsoft version, the SQL Server version of ANSI SQL. And it is a language which is procedural, straightforward language using logic, using looping, etc., which we will look at later stages. But here, this is the language. And language is used for various purposes. So first, initially, we will see the purpose of DML. DML means data manipulation language. The same T-SQL, when used for data manipulation means the application wants to insert some data. How do I communicate that to database? The application wants to delete some data. How do I communicate to that to the database and update the data? How do I communicate? This is done through a language, and this language uses certain keywords. They are called the language together with these keywords. The T-SQL with these keywords is called data manipulation language. So we will see the terminologies involved when we talk about T-SQL, which is required for DML or data manipulation language. We would have already created some databases, etc. when we see data table design. Now we will create the database using code. So we'll look at how to use code to create database tables, how to insert data, how to delete data. So we'll be looking at this language T-SQL from the angle of data manipulation and also data definition. Because when you create a database, create table, etc., that comes under the understanding of data definition. Once we have created the table, we know how to insert a data into the table, delete the data, and update the data. We will see how to query the data which goes into the table. How do I query it? This is what we will be looking at. Now, the writing basic query, that is our option in here when we talk about writing SQL statements. So first query we start with, we see how to get the data using the select class, from class. These are different classes. Then sorting and filtering. So if I want only some data, how do I get it? Right? And how do I sort the order in which the data is got? How do I aggregate or consolidate the data? How do I group the data? So all this is what we look at in SQL query basic. Then we look at SQL Server joins. So initially we will look at how to get the data from a table. In joins, we will look at how to get the data from multiple tables. So we have here cross join, inner join, outer join, and full join. So there are various join options available. And we will look at what each option is and what is the purpose of each option, because each of them have different purposes. Then after we finish joining, getting data from multiple tables, we will look at how to write queries inside the query. So there are certain requirements for which we write query inside the query. So we will look at what is called a subquery. And when subquery is used in the from clause, we will look at what is a derived table, right? That is, and then how to use subquery in the where clause, how to use subquery in the select clause. So there are different clauses in the outer query, and we will look at how to use them. Then we have correlated subqueries. That means how the subquery runs for every execution of the outer query. So there will be one outer query. It will be running for every row in the outer query. The subquery will execute once. So we will look about how to do that. So by this time, you will be comfortable pulling the data out from SQL Server in various ways. So this is your subquery, join, aggregation, all these basic query stuff. How does this help? When you understand all of this, you are now ready to look at features that are available in the current version. Version to version, the feature changes. And certain features are based on your prior knowledge of basic query understanding. So we will first look at the basic query understanding, and then you are ready. Even if you want to do self-study, you would be ready for going through the different options available like common table expression, pivot, unpivot, etc. So that is the purpose of this, these topics. Then we get the next set of topic. In the next set of topic, we will see how T-SQL can be used for some basic business logic that we want to implement inside SQL Server. What do I mean by business logic? Let's take an example. When I withdraw cash using ATM, then internally the application is going to talk to the database, is going to insert some data, some information is inserted into the database, and some places it is updated, etc. So therefore, there is a procedure involved when you withdraw cash, and that procedure is completely hidden for us. Now what you do, you basically start using, start seeing how I can implement this logic inside SQL Server database, so that the application just calls that procedure and is able to execute it. So you will be hit as a person who develops the application, front-end application. He will be hidden from the logic, but at the same time he will be able to make a call, and this is called stored procedure. And for stored procedure, it is a structure, basically a set of steps are there, and you can implement those steps using T-SQL syntax. So you have T-SQL syntax that comes into picture. Then apart from that, I may have certain complex processing that I need to do row by row. So we can use cursors and we can use functions. So cursors and functions can be used. We can also use triggers and views. So we will look at how we use stored procedures, how we use cursors. Cursors are implemented for row by row processing. We will also look at when to use functions. So I want certain complex calculations, and in that manner, I should be able to use my function. So how do I use my function? We will look at that. Then we have triggers and views. So what is this trigger and view? I want to implement certain business rules which are going to be a little more complex, and they involve certain statements. Like for example, before I withdraw the cash, SQL Server should check whether there is balance in my account. These are the examples. Likewise, you can have both pre and post. There are certain rules which are important pre, and there are certain rules which are important post. So we will look at both of that. Then we will see how to create views. So views are again database objects or components which are used to show you the information from the table without writing any query. So somebody has already written the query. You don't have to write it. So you just have to select, or you have to call the view, and the view will give you the data. And then we will talk a little about what is indexes and indexed views. So this is our what we are going to cover as far as SQL Server is going to basic SQL Server is concerned. So this is a 30-hour course. So 1 hour every day, 5 days a week. Before we continue with the first topic being introduction to databases, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share the URL for student information. So student has to give the information if he is interested in joining this program. So that information, student information, it is already given in the chat box. So let me just show that chat box to you. So if we go to the chat box, so it's already given here. You can see it is the form for student information. So click on the link and please put in your student information if you're interested in joining this course. Now, before we proceed with the first topic of the course, what is the purpose of learning SQL Server for anybody who wants to get into data science or data engineering? Okay, both data science is there and data engineering is part of it. So if I am an engineer and I want to get into the stream of data science, I should be a data engineer. So there I should know how to put the data into the database, how to modify or transform the data, and then how to store the data for the sake of analysis, and how to present the data in different reporting platforms. So this knowledge should be there. And of course, going further, you have to have knowledge of certain AI algorithms which are used for the purpose of analysis. But that becomes very advanced. But basically, if you want to get into the stream of data science, you need to know at least one database technology. And SQL Server is a very old and very well known, used in many projects, and therefore it is one of the database technologies which is popular also. So it is good to know it. And if you know this, you can get into the stream of data science. And a basic SQL Server developer will be getting anywhere between, say, 5 to 7 lakhs per annum. If you're starting your career, that is a good opportunity. And this also gives you an opportunity to understand how data is stored. And later, you can actually go ahead with other career options like getting into Power BI, etc. as data analyst. So if you understand the basics of data and then you get into tool like Power BI, you can become a data analyst. And I just know that data analysts can get a salary of up to 14 lakhs. Okay, within a year and a half, if you are good in data, you can easily make it. So this is the advantage of learning basic SQL Server. So with this, we move on to the first topic. So let me share. Okay. So the first topic that we are going to see is what are the systems, database systems that one has. So we have to understand now the business is there. What is the purpose of data? How does it work? So I am just simulating in majority of businesses how it works. Of course, if I look at small one-to-one interaction, right, data may work differently. Like you're in a car and you want to use artificial intelligence for the car to drive automatically. This is one of the areas of artificial intelligence. Then there will be a slight difference in the way how data is modified. But in general, for big businesses, this is how the data movement is. So that is why I want to show this aspect. So we will look at that. Now, so as usual, before going into the session, again, reminder, this URL which you're seeing in the screen and which I'm pointing out here, this URL, please fill if you're interested further in getting into the program, enrolling into this program of SQL Server Basics. So this is the URL, Sunny Designer. And this URL is given in the chat box. So please go through the URL after this demo session and fill it. Okay. Now, any business has two aspects as far as data is concerned. The first aspect is I want to store the data into the system. Take any business, like let's go, you go into a supermarket, you buy items. So your information like telephone number, etc. is given, your name is given, and the items that you have purchased is given. All this data gets entered into a system, right? So you take that example. You take an example of a flight. In a flight also, when the flight is moving, the state of various controls, like how much is the air pressure, how much is the temperature, various aspects that are required for the aircraft to fly, that is also monitored. Monitored means what? The data is taken and it is fed into black box. So you take any system, information is very, very important. So we took one system, one example of a business, departmental store, another example of the flight. So science also requires a lot of data for observation. So data in general is really important. So how does a business, what kind of systems the business use for the purpose of, or what kind of database systems the business uses for the purpose of its application? Let us look at it. First, initially, you want to put in the data. You have collected the data. And whenever you're collecting the data, the system is called as OLTP system. OLTP means Online Transaction Processing System. What is that? Whenever you make transactions or operations, like you purchase an item, if you take a bank, you withdraw cash, you deposit cash, you deposit a check. If you take any other place, let us say a factory, you want to know what is the production, so information about production. So all this has to be collected. Where the data gets collected, that system of the database is called OLTP, online. Online because it is always available and it is continuously collecting information in a system, in a business. So it is called online transaction. Transaction means the day-to-day transactions that are happening in the business, that information is collected. And this transaction can be of any, in any area in the business. For example, one can be sales, the other can be finance. So financial transactions of a business, sales transaction of a business, customer transaction of a business. So it can be anything. So therefore, OLTP is an important system. Now, let us take the example typically that I have a bank and the bank has many branches. Now, initially, the branch, very old branch is there in the bank, and that branch is having an Excel which is used for feeding information. So I have an application in the bank like Finacle, etc. Very rudimentary basic application which fills the data into Excel and takes care of security itself. So you can have that application that way. Maybe you can have application which store data in Notepad or some data format which cannot be opened or which cannot be used by other applications. Or an application can store the data in database. So as the transaction is happening, the data can be stored in different data stores. Access also is another option. So this data store where the information is stored from the application is called as the OLTP system. Why? Because it is storing the transaction information from the business directly. Now, the transaction information, what is the characteristics of such a data when you're storing that information? For example, you go to the bank, you are going to deposit some money or withdraw some money, and that gets translated into a process of insert, update, and delete. So therefore, if you look at it here, you can basically talk about transactional information, right? So transactional insert, update, and delete happens. This is why it is called transactional. So whenever you purchase something, new data goes into the system, insert. When you want to say, for example, update the interest rate of a deposit, then you update. You want to update the information of the customer, update. If you know, we use always the what is called as the know your customer. Know your customer is all about updating the information in case the customer is having a different data, or the data is changing for the customer. So this is what we are looking at. Then this is the transactional part. So we are first looking at the transactional part. The analytical part, I will talk about it later. Okay, so first is getting the data in transactional system. In fact, I will write it as getting the data in. Now, so you're talking about getting the data in here. So we can copy it. We can actually put it as transactional, meaning getting the data in. Similarly, analytical, meaning getting the data out. So we will look at that later. So first look at this system on the left hand side. Then what should be the goal when I get the data? So for example, you can have multiple products on which you are having the data. Like let's say fixed deposit is a product, recurring deposit is a product. Similarly, many customers are there. Now, I can store the data of the customer in one place. That is better option. Because if I have to update the address of the customer, let us say, if I store it in multiple places, I have to update everywhere. If I forget updating in one place, then it leads to inconsistency of information. And therefore, we go for normalized data. Normalized data means what? Data which is deduplicated. So duplication in data is removed. In case there is duplication in data, it is removed. So you store the data, unique information is stored for everything. So there is no disturbance, there is no inconsistency. So if I have to update the customer address, I update the customer address only in one place, not in multiple places. Okay, so this is deduplication. Then we have different data formats. What do you mean by different data formats? One can be stored in Excel. In one branch, the branch is small. So I don't want to invest in a big database. So I may use a small Excel. The application will ensure that it is secure. So an Excel or a notepad, etc. So the data information or the transaction information goes into any one of them. Some branches will be big. So it uses a very sophisticated database engine. So therefore, it can have different data formats. So we are just analyzing the nature of the data that will get in to the system. Then data can frequently change. Here data frequently changes. For example, every month or even every week, mostly some information will change. If you look at interest rates, it keeps changing. Every 3 months, the interest rate keeps changing. Then there will be offers. Offers keep changing. Right? So somebody will insert, update, delete. That means somebody may add a new transaction. Somebody has to update the balance of the account. So constantly there is a change in the data, as well as there is inserting of new data. The customer goes away, the account is closed, and the account is closed, that information either has to be deleted or it has to be archived. So constant change is there. That is what we are looking at. That is the nature of the data in OLTP system, online transaction processing system. Then for creating this data store, a place to store such a data, we have to use modeling. Modeling means what? We are going to store the data physically in the tables, but for storing the data physically in the table, you have to create a logical model. And that model that is used here is called ER modeling, Entity Relationship Model. Now, this model is going to logically show you how the actual system will work or store the data. To give you a simple example, it is you are having a house, you want to build a house, and the house is big. So initially you can't start building, but you want to see before the building starts how it is going to look. So most of these buildings, they have the small models. In fact, nowadays, big buildings which are there, if you look at societies, you can see the entire society model is given, including say gym, etc. All the facilities or amenities. So this modeling, it is a small model. You can't start living in the model. It is a logical model for us to imagine how the data is going to be stored. So this modeling system is called ER modeling or entity relationship modeling. Now the data, what is the type of the data, quality of the data that goes into the transaction system? Okay, the quality of the data is it can be dirty. Why? Because when you are looking at a business and when the customer is making certain transaction with the business, there is a possibility that during the transaction some mistake can happen. Okay, like there is one transaction that the customer wants to make, like withdraw cash, but due to some reason it has not withdrawn, right? But there is an entry in the table, so that has to be cleaned. Then the customer tries withdrawing cash or depositing cash multiple times, and there is a possibility due to system problem that entry has been made for the same transaction multiple times. So these are certain data that may be dirty and has to be looked after. There can be duplicate entries. In bank, I cannot exactly talk about duplicate entry and dirty data, but you can take an example, like when you look at going to a shop and purchase. So you've purchased a few products. Then suddenly you notice one more product. Billing is already done. You show this product. So you have to add it into the billing. Another example is billing is already done, but you want to change one product with another product. These are all examples where data is already added, but it could either be dirty. Dirty means what? With respect to the actual transaction, the data will not give you the exact information. That is what we mean by dirty data. And there can be duplicate entries. So this is how the transactional data looks, or online transactional processing looks. And what is its main important point? The important point is there are certain rules while transaction is happening. Like before I withdraw cash, I have to check the account balance. After I withdraw the cash, I have to subtract whatever cash I have withdrawn from the account. So these are some of the rules. These rules are important for transactional system. Rules that will regulate how the transaction is being done. Another example is if I deposit cash more than 50,000, then automatically it has to be scrutinized, because government or income tax officials may ask for scrutiny of such transactions which are above 50,000, maybe 1 lakh. So then I have to put it into a separate table. So there are certain regulatory requirements as per the bank, as per the income tax authorities, certain government rules, and those regulatory compliances also have to be taken care of when you're designing the OLTP system. So mainly OLTP system is when I put in the data should meet the rules. Okay, now let's go to the next part. The next part is fine. I have entered the data. Is that all? Answer is no. The day-to-day, there may be certain basic queries, like a branch manager wants to see how many transactions have been done in the branch today and what is the value of the transaction. So the branch manager wants to see that. How is he going to see that? So he has to ensure that he has some basic tool which will give information from the database, right? And that is the reporting aspect of the OLTP system. And here, if you notice, maximum transactions happen. Whole day it will be insert, update, delete. But during the transaction, there will be some basic query that is required. Like if you go to the branch and if you're depositing cash, when you're depositing cash, you ask the cash counter, right? What is the current balance or what is some information about the account? So he has to get into the system and withdraw the information. Now, this information that he is going to cull out is from the OLTP system. So there is some reporting. Reporting does not mean the actual final report. Here, reporting means intermediate reporting. Like another example is you try to withdraw some cash and the cashier says, I'm sorry, you can't withdraw cash because your minimum balance is it's already what you have in the bank, in the account is minimum. If it goes below, it will go below the minimum balance required. It will be told. Similarly, they may say that, okay, you have the account, we have deducted the service charge. So all this information, from where does the person get across the cash counter? It is by the tool which is getting information from the OLTP system. But you can't call it as a reporting tool. You can just call it as data retrieval tool. That's all. It's better to call it as data retrieval. Right? Simple data retrieval for transactions. So reporting, we cannot exactly call this for the purpose of reporting. Now, this is the first OLTP system. Now, next is the OLAP system. So you can see here on the right hand side, it is called Online Analytical Processing System. What is the purpose of this system? Finally, all the data that goes into the system has to be analyzed. And why analysis is important? Let's take a simple example. I am having a branch and I have products like loan, home loans. I have product like business loans. I have product like other loans, like loans for bike, loans for small equipments, etc. Vehicle loans. So I have various products. Now, unless and until I am able to analyze the data at the end of the month, I will not know which product is selling more. And I will not be able to see what is the reason a particular product is selling less. So there is a lot of information that I require, or you can say a lot of insight I require on the information so that I can take a, you can say, informed decision. What is the informed decision? Suppose the loan percentage you have kept as 7.26 or 7.2, and you find that the people are not buying, not getting the loan or opening a loan account because the interest rate is a little higher. So how do you know that? So you can collect information from the user, and you may also want to know what is the reason for not applying for loan, etc. So when that information gets collected from call center, when they give you a call, right? The loan is available, just to tell you, credit card is available. So when you say, I don't want, then that information is going to the system. And when the information goes to the system, that information is finally used to analyze. Therefore, the business decision is becoming better and better. Because if you notice the entire transaction, it is between the business and the consumer. And the consumer's mind keeps changing because everything keeps changing. So that is also changing. And therefore, the business also should keep on getting new information so that it can analyze and see what changed. And therefore, OLAP is required for reporting. This is where reporting comes into picture. And the purpose of OLAP is there are two types of analysis which we see. One is called the consolidation analysis, where you consolidate or summarize data, like in the entire month, how much I have spent for all my expenses in the branch. In the entire month, how many transactions have come. These are all consolidative analysis. Then what is predictive analysis? Based on the old data, this is a very basic form of learning, machine learning they say. Out of the basic data that you already have, we want to figure out how many customers will apply for loan next month or next year. How many customers will apply for business loans? How many customers will apply for home loan? How many customers will apply for vehicle loan? So predictive. So approximate predictive analysis. And what kind of interest rate will attract the customer? So this is the prediction. So here we are mainly focusing on getting the data out, not getting the data in, but getting the data out. So this is the format of the OLAP. So you have to look at the format here and you see the differences. Here, I have to remove duplicate data. Why? Because duplicate data can lead to inconsistency whenever there is a change. Whereas here, we are looking at data which is duplicated. Why are we duplicating data here? Because in here, it is okay to have duplicate data for faster query, for faster analysis. I am not going to be updating this data. The purpose of analysis is only to retrieve the data. The constant updation happens only in the OLTP system, not on your OLAP system. So this is what it is. Then formats are regularized. Formats are regularized means you'll have only one OLAP system. Here you don't have control over the format. Why? Because you have different outlets. Each outlet will have its own application, and the application will have its own data store mechanism. Whereas in OLAP, it is basically for the entire enterprise. So you will have formats which are regularized. You will have one format. Everything is stored in a database, maybe Oracle or SQL, or everything is stored in Azure. So it can be any of the form. Now, different data formats are there in OLTP system, but the format is regularized in OLAP. Then for a database, there is a frequent change, insert, update, delete, which we already seen, OLTP system. But here it is more of selection. Selection means querying. And because there's more of selection, it will be easy to cull the information out. It will be easy if I keep it in denormalized or duplicate format. The modeling used here is called ER modeling. We have already seen that. Here, the modeling used is UDM, Unified Dimension Modeling. Here, the data may be dirty. Here, I cannot afford to have dirty data, because if I have dirty data, my analysis will depend on that dirty data, and the analysis will be wrong. So that information it's a problem actually. Similarly, duplicate entry also I should not entertain. Information is wrong, analysis will be wrong, decision will be wrong. So there should be no duplicate entry of the data. This is how the system works. So OLTP is this way, OLAP is this way. Now, what is the challenge for any data engineer is how to pull the data. First challenge is how to get in the data into the transaction system. The next challenge is how to pull the data from the transaction system to the analytical system. Many times the systems are the same, but many of the times the system have to be different. For example, detailed reporting of what is happening in my bank for the entire month. If I'm going to start retrieving the data through OLTP system, it will take hours and my OLTP system will slow down. So if some customer wants to withdraw cash, deposit cash, he cannot do it. Therefore, I need a separate OLAP system. Because OLAP system is query intensive, OLTP system is insert, update, delete intensive. So there is a different requirement, therefore two systems. So how do you pull this information? We pull this information through the process called ETL. So a data engineer should know that the requirement for OLAP is different, OLTP is different, how I store data in OLAP is different, how I store data in OLTP is different. So after getting the data into the system, I have to transform the data. It is called extract, transform, and load process. So I extract the data from the OLTP system, transform as required, because I may not require the data in the same format. So I have different formats. I have to regularize the format. I have to regularize data types. I have to remove duplicates. I have to remove dirty data. I may have to denormalize the data. So all these different transformation means changing of data is required and that change is done before it is put back into the OLAP system. And finally, once the data is in OLAP system, I can go for reporting. In OLTP, I use basic data retrieval. In OLAP system, I use reporting. So you have different tools for reporting, like SSRS is there, Power BI is there, Excel is there. All of them can report the data based on your OLAP system. This is how the basic data flow is from OLTP system to OLAP system in any business. Data is input first for transactions, and after data is input, the data is analyzed for reporting. So this is how it is. So with this, we complete today's session.